So we're live, or I guess not live, but recording.
Okay, so second episode. Okay,
Good,
so
good to see you.
good to see you. So yesterday I was watching an interview of Stefanos Tsitsipas. He was talking in one podcast with Caroline Garcia, and he was talking about his relationship with his father. And he was saying that he's no longer traveling with his father, and his father was former tennis player. He was coaching him all his life, but he said one interesting thing that he felt like he doesn't have a father anymore, and he just has a tennis coach and tennis coach 24/7. And he said that yes, his father helped him a lot, and maybe saved him from doing a lot of mistakes, and he brought him to up to top 10. But he said he wants to now maybe make also his own mistakes and to learn and to grow as a person and as a tennis player. So he's no longer traveling with him, and he's trying to has it on his own, but still having a good relationship with his father, and he wants to have a real father somehow. And other interview in this relationship, father and son, I saw Alexander Zverev talking about his father, also former tennis player, and he said his father, he can be a tennis coach on the tennis court, but father at home, and he's not like uh, too much interesting in his free life and what is he doing from a coach perspective, but just from the father's perspective. And the other example is also Ivan Ljubičić, and he said that he has a son who is 15 years old, and he's not at all coaching him. He has other people that he's coaching with, and he only because he said he cannot be that objective, and he only tell him something only if the son asks him any advice. So I would like to talk about the relationship between players and the fathers. They also played tennis, but then also maybe in general, what is the role of the parent and how much involved or not involved in their tennis they should be.
Yeah, so that's a great topic, I think, and I think as you were talking, I was already thinking about like this is it's a good name for this episode. I guess would be like parent versus coach, like the
Yeah.
difference between a parent and a coach, and then the coach and a parent also the other way, right? Because I was thinking because you're a parent and a coach, to your son, so you
Yeah.
know it from this side, like the examples you just gave. For me, I don't, I'm a coach, so I know it from the other side also, where sometimes I guess you can feel like the player you're coaching is like your kid, even though they're not. So that's also interesting, like to look at it from the other side. Um, but maybe I would actually start asking you, like, what is your experience? Because you have this experience similar to all these other guys that you just mentioned. So tell, what is your experience with like coaching your son and like also being a past player and kind of juggling those roles between like where's the father, where's the coach, what's your experience?
Yeah, there are some advantages, I would say, and also disadvantages to coach my own son. And of course, you are more like emotionally involved, but that's also a good thing because you will do anything for him, and you also care so much. Then you also do your own education and research, and you try to do as much as possible. Uh, but also the disadvantages they are like you try sometimes too much, and it's too much for the player, and they somehow I can relate to Tsitsipas situation that sometimes it can be too much, and also the son. I like the relationship we have because we are very open, and I believe he's free to express when it's already too much, or he can, I mean, he let me know that okay, that's I want to have some free time or free space even on the tennis court, and I can understand it, but I'm still learning, and that's why I'm also discussing this topic.
Yeah, I think the one thing you said there just resonated with me is like the open communication. That's so important because with the player I'm working now is like the 15-year-old. I'm seeing it from the other perspective also of like, and we talked in the last time we talked, we also mentioned the developmental stage and different, realizing that the player is like what age they're in and there are different things they need, and in this like adolescence. And I saw it with my player just going from like 14 to 15. It's like a big change where at some point they need that's like a kid who needs like more guidance and more, is looking at you like an adult, like someone to give guidance and solutions and problem solve, and looking at more of a leadership role. And then suddenly it switches and you have someone who wants to be like more your equal and wants to talk to you like, hey, we are on the same level and we are equals and treat me more like an adult. And this is an interesting stage where it can almost feel like overnight it changes, and then you have to adapt very quickly, like okay, you have to switch gears, and suddenly okay, I can't just hold their hand and take them where, a few months ago that's what they wanted or needed or felt lost if I didn't do that. And suddenly now when I try to do that, they're like pulling back on my arm like, hey, let me go, like I want to do my own thing. Kind of what you mentioned with Tsitsipas, which it's interesting that he realized it now. I don't know how old is he, like what, like 27 or something, I guess. So he's having his like adolescence like much later, right? And more generally speaking, I think like psychologically, like this is not just in tennis, but generally in our lives, we all experience this or the tough thing of the separating process from the parent, um, which I can imagine in tennis it can be more complicated. The parent's also a coach, right? Um, so there's many interesting things, or avenues we can go here. I'm trying to think which way to go, but going back to the open communication, that you mentioned, I think in our culture, like coming from, we both come from Slovakia, and I think Slovakia historically was kind of more like the Slavic and the kind of Russian and this kind of mentality, because of the history we have. And I realized in my experience that we come from a culture where like authority was someone who knows, and someone that we come from a culture where we have these programs and beliefs from a young age. And you're older than me, so you're even more so. You're in like another generation, and your parents probably even more so, so it's changing now. But I still see these patterns of like, okay, someone who's a parent or a coach or anyone like, a teacher or someone in a position of authority is like the one who needs to be listened to. And the problem is that because it's now changing, the new generations don't look at it that way anymore, but the older generations still think it should be that way. And it's creating a lot of clashes between the generations nowadays, on all levels, in schools with teachers. You hear there's a lot that teachers are like, we don't know what to do with the kids, and kids are like, we don't know what to do with the teachers. and with coaches, etc. So I think there's an important topic nowadays in tennis and outside of tennis of realizing that to have respect of your player, and to have them like listen to you, listen to your advice, and you need to have this open communication, but actually treating them like an equal, treating them like they also understand, they know. Because especially nowadays, we have internet, we have so much information, they can watch matches and all that. Like they know so much also. And this approach, when you approach it from this point of view of like, I know because I'm the coach or I'm the parent or I'm the authority and you don't know, and that's why I'm here to tell you, it just doesn't work and it just backfires most of the time. So I think I'm really happy to hear what you said, that you have the open communication. It's great job on your part. I think is that there is that openness to express. Like he can also tell you, hey, like I disagree with this or I think this, and it's not a one-way street, which I see a lot out there with a lot of coaches getting into that role of thinking I am the coach, so automatically my role here is to tell you what to do and you need to accept it.
Mm. And also my experience is like they get much more respect when they somehow feel that that the coach cares and knows what he's talking about, than when they feel like he doesn't care that much, or he's just kind of bullshitting, or he's just saying something because he heard it or he just somehow learned it, but they feel like it's not the way, or they don't think that. So I mean, the if you give them good, I mean, arguments, or if they just really feel that what they feel like they know what you are talking about, or what you're talking about, that then the respect comes with it.
And also I think saying that you don't know,
Yeah.
because you don't always know.
Yeah.
And I think and I have fallen in that trap before many times, and we all have. I'm sure that's like the ego, and it comes back to this feeling of like I'm the coach. This can be the illusion of like I'm the coach. I'm the one who's supposed to know because I'm in this role.
Mm.
Um, but sometimes you don't know, and it's okay to actually say that, like, hey, like I don't know. Let's figure it out together, or like I'll go and find out and I come back to you.
Right.
Because like you said, it's much better than bullshitting, because if you start to bullshit, and then what can happen very quickly is you can lose trust with the player, because they can sense that you're bullshitting, and then it very quickly can become like, okay, so when are you bullshitting and when should I listen to you, when shouldn't I, like,
Mm.
just like in any relationship, like this goes beyond tennis, right? uh
Mm.
that's why we're beyond tennis. But um so I have this experience too, that and it's a ego check, in those moments, like
Right.
realizing, okay, I don't know, and it's okay to say that. And more importantly, one more thing I want to say with this is, why is that important to also admit that you don't know, is because it gives the player um, this feeling that it's okay to not know also for them. So paradoxically, it actually builds confidence, because it shows them, hey, like he also doesn't know. So when they don't know or when they're unsure of something, they realize it's okay, it's normal. I don't have
Mm.
to be perfect.
Right.
Because this old school model that I mentioned before, that from the culture we come from, was more like, okay, the parent, the coach, the teacher is like God, like they're perfect, they know, and we need to listen to them. Like it creates so much pressure, right? Because then it makes you feel inferior, it makes you feel like the kid or the player, like, okay, so I don't know. And that's long gone. Like I'm saying, these new generations now is it doesn't work anymore, which is great, which is a great progress. And I think it's up to us as coaches, as teachers or parents, to kind of have that ego check of like, okay, we don't know everything, and it's okay, and they can still respect us, even though if we don't know something, if we can admit we don't know. And that's the leap of faith that we have to take in those moments that's so difficult to do, right? Because
Mm.
you can feel like, if I admit I don't know, suddenly I will lose my credibility, or they will not
Right.
respect me anymore, or something like that, you know.
Right. Right.
So showing your humanity, it's so important. Because then you can connect. And I feel like that's what you guys have, right? With your son. That
Yeah.
um that's great.
And it's interesting how is also everybody's different, and every player is different, every parent is different. Uh, so it can be the relationships differ. It's like I I know some parents that are very strict, and it's working somehow. Then I know some parents that are not involved almost at all, and it also works. So it's very personal, and it differ a lot.
That makes sense. Well, what I'm thinking of though in tennis is it's for tennis specifically, right? Like at the end of the day, you're on your own there. So
Mm,
it kind of goes back to what we talked about last time when we talked about the understanding of the game and actually the enjoyment that comes from the understanding of the game. Um, that also implies that the player can think on their own.
mm,
So, you know, if you have a coach that's like spoon feeding you, that's always giving you, like telling you what to do, and you just do it, a lot of those players I see that they don't know what to do out on the court, or they can become great, but they're very like they have a limit to where they can get to, because at some point like the other coaches or players will figure out their game, and then they just change something, and then they can't adapt. They don't, because they're not
mm,
thinking on the court.
mm,
So they can go far with the strict kind of like, you know, drills and regime, and like teaching them the right things and just downloading it into them with the strictness. But when it comes to, you know, when they meet an opponent who can figure them out and change something, that they can't adapt because
mm,
they're too rigid, because they've been brought up in a rigid framework of you do this and the other thing, and that's it, you know.
mm, mm.
In tennis and I think in life also that doesn't work, especially nowadays. Like it's things change so fast. I remember I was watching, I forget who it was. It was a guy who was giving a talk at MIT, and and he finished his talk by saying, he said, like, in this today changing world, like what can he say, what is the one skill that people like the students, like future generators, wanna need to learn? He said it's the ability to learn and adapt, because things are changing so fast that the best thing you can give to the next generation is the open-mindedness, the
Mm,
realization of I don't know, what we just talked about.
mm,
Realizing, okay, if I don't know, I always need to keep learning and adapting and figuring things out, because things are changing so fast. Which I don't think comes from the rigid, the strict kind of, you know, training methods. Which I think Tsitsipas is actually a good example, right? Like you mentioned
mm,
Tsitsipas at the beginning. You
mm,
can see how like he took it so far with his like the one game that's kind
mm,
of like drilled into him, but which is amazing how far he got with that. But he reached his ceiling, and we can see that he reached like a ceiling of, because he cannot. It's so hard for him to adapt or change strategies or do other things that guys like Sinner, Alcaraz, or Djokovic can do so well. Um, so I don't think that, in my opinion, I think that rigidity is not, you know, can get you only so far.
mm. Exactly. The adaptation comes from the highest to the lowest level. It's like I was also watching Tomáš Machač giving a talk somewhere, an interview, and he said last year he didn't have 1 week for practice because he was going from one tournament to the other, different balls, different surfaces, different attitudes, whatever. So the only thing what is left is to adapt, and you have to adapt to the tournament, to the balls, to the everything. Then you have to adapt to the new strategies, because the players, they know you more and more, so they know what to play, and you have to change it and be ready to switch it even after half a set or whatever. And then also the adaptation in every single point, when there is a bad bounce on or the sun is shining, whatever. So the adaptation comes from, I mean, on all the levels.
Exactly. And I think the more, in my opinion, one of the, like, in my philosophy or how I think of things, is like the more options you have, the better available. Like the more options you have, the more adaptable you are. And that kind of goes into all the different levels of, like, let's say we take a forehand. So like more forehands you have, the better, so the more different forehands you can hit in terms of speed and spin and quality and direction and height, and the more forehands you have available, the more you're gonna be able to adapt to whatever forehand is necessary at the moment. So I think it's going back again to this understanding of the game, but part of the understanding of the game is understanding what the options are. Like, what are the different varieties and options, and always exploring what is possible. And I think that goes back to this open-mindedness and the open communication that we're talking about, because the more you communicate, the more there is that open communication, the more you can explore, and where you can find out, hey, like, oh, there's this other option, and there's this other thing you can do from this position, and let's try this out, and like I was saying last time we talked, it's this space of safe exploration when it comes especially to the individual training with the coach, and also with the practices with the competing with other players in the practice. It's good to, I think, encourage the players to explore as many options as possible, and to practice different scenarios and options, and push them out of the comfort zone of the ones that they're good at, so they can expand whatever it is, different forehands, different backhands, different serves, different positions on the return, like returning up close or far back,
Right.
or whatever it is.
There was in Slovakia, there was a workshop for coaches, and there was a former player of Bautista Agut, and now he's coaching Martin Landaluce. I don't know his name, but the main point of his webinar or whatever was that nowadays all of the players, they are so fit, they can hit from all of the angles, they can serve big, and to play even better than the Sinners and Djokovic's, it's almost impossible. So what he's teaching his young player, who is already like 18 years old and 150 in the world, is to find multiple ways how to win the point. And that was all of the exercises, and all of the things he was talking about was about this, to know how to play the slice, and to play a lot of drop shots, and to have the variety, so you can use whatever is necessary in that moment.
And that makes me think back to what you're saying makes sense. It makes me think of this idea of to be able to think of different ways to win the point, you need an open mind to be creative. And to be able to do that, you need to explore a lot, like we said, which means you're also going to fail a lot, because you're trying new things. So in this, I think it's a Japanese word, this Shaoshin mindset, which is like a beginner's mindset. You're always trying new things. But to be able to do that, you need to just growing up, and like what we're talking about, the role of the coach or the parent, that's okay to make mistakes. And I thought of what you said at the beginning about this disadvantage of being a parent also, that you're more emotionally involved, and how I'm just thinking about now how that can also cause could potentially cause problems with that more emotionally you're involved, the more there can be pressure on results, and more pressure on results can cause that we don't want to make mistakes. So it's more focused on results than on like exploration and growth and learning new things. So I wonder what you're thinking about that in your experience.
True. I was thinking about also when we started with the relationship, father and son or parents and player, it's somehow interesting that I remember when I was playing, I used to get coached by Miroslav Mečír, and he's like Olympic winner or whatever. But he was, I mean, he never somehow put it pressure on me. I mean, he was like easygoing and everything, but I had so much pressure that such a good coach is coaching me that I never experienced that in my life, that I wanted to make him so proud that it was unbearable almost. And when I'm talking to my son sometimes, or he told me that he also, like, he wants me to be, I believe I don't put that pressure on him, but somehow he feels and and he feels that he wants to do so well because of me that he gets to a lot of pressure somehow. And I would like to somehow I make it less, or I don't know somehow what to do, not to somehow not that he's feeling it this way, but I don't know. I mean how to do it, or what's the issue there, you know?
Yeah, no, it's a great point. I mean, the first thing I thought of was what I would say is that just like last time when we talked, I was saying that first we have to look at, you know, that there is like we're human, and then we're, you know, men or women, and then we're athletes, and then we're tennis players, you know. So the start from the broader categories. And I think on the broader categories we have to realize that this competition of son versus father is a natural thing, is a very natural developmental kind of process, which is good because on at the end of the day we want the next generations to be better than us, right? And so I think that's a very natural thing. So I think just like with any topic, I would say the first step is acceptance. So you're asking me the question, you know, what can I do to for him to not have so much pressure that I was a past player, I was successful, and like first step for you, I think, is to accept that he has this pressure and it's okay for him to have the pressure. That's why I started off by saying that it's actually a natural process. And it doesn't matter if it's tennis or if it's like a son of a wealthy father who wants also then to be successful, and feels pressure to also succeed, or whatever it is. So that's the first thing that I think is natural. The other thing is that what I already said before, I wonder if your coach, Miroslav Mečír, if he ever showed vulnerability. What I mean by that is what I already mentioned before, saying, I don't know, because that can help big time. That's why I mentioned it before, is when the authority steps off the pedestal, comes down from this high cloud and shows you like, hey, like, I'm also human. I don't have all the answers. Like, I'm figuring things out also. So it's okay. And I think this is very, very necessary and very, very important, especially for boys, because in this age, in this, you know, puberty, when the testosterone kicks in, and, you know, testosterone is connected with aggression and, you know, competitiveness and all these things. There's also a lot of insecurity that comes with the fact that, you know, like, I'm not as good as him or her or whoever, you know, and comparing what we discussed last time. And in there, in that stage, is also important to, for someone, I think, to come and come to the player or the boy or the girl and say, hey, it's okay, you're struggling.
Mm.
So the accepting the struggle, I think, is always the beautiful. I think it was from Viktor Frankl, right? The man's search for meaning. He, you know, the whole topic of his was, you know, he went through the concentration camp in Auschwitz and he survived, and then he became a therapist and started helping people. But his experience from going through Auschwitz was what made him realize why he survived, not just like physically, which was also lucky, I guess, but also emotionally, was that he kept this meaning in his life. He kept imagining life after the camp. He never lost sight of higher meaning. So, and the idea that he brings is that this voluntary acceptance of suffering actually makes the suffering go away, or makes the suffering at least manageable.
Mm.
So that brings me back to what I said at the beginning, is when you accept that he's suffering and you voluntarily go into it, that that's part of life and it's part of his stage right now, comparing himself and compare himself to you and all that. And it's okay, because that's how he actually gets better, and he will get better than you at one point in some area of life. It doesn't matter what it is, and that's what you want at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Then you can approach it with much less pressure also on you.
Mm. Yeah, it's like it could be interesting to talk with Peter Korda. I mean, former number one player who has 3 children, and the girls are top 10 in golf, and the son playing tennis is like 20 or 30 in the world. So they must have done something good, or they should understand that how successful the children are.
I remember I thought of when at the beginning you were saying about this. I remembered the audiobook by Matthew McConaughey, which I know you, yeah,
Right.
recommended you just listen to also. And maybe you remember this scene where the father challenges like the oldest son, and they like basically ends up like they
Mm.
end up fighting outside. The father goes like, hit me, and the son goes like, I don't want to hit you, and ends up like with the son like cracking the head open on the father
Mm.
and getting him unconscious. And then the father comes back and he says like, basically, I don't remember exactly, but something along the lines of, you're ready, you know. he
Exactly.
he passed the test. And there's something in cultures all throughout history. There were these initiations where the boy becomes the man. um and this was exactly connected with testosterone, like around the age where these cultures saw that there's like sexualities emerging in the boys, and they becoming more reckless and more aggressive and all this. Back then, because those communities relied so highly on each other, they couldn't afford for the boys to do something stupid out of recklessness, because it could endanger the whole community. So they were performing these rituals, which were showing the boys there was usually something super dangerous that they had to do, just to show them their mortality, to realize, okay, I'm not invincible.
Mm.
You know, I have this body and this physicality, so I need to have boundaries. So um, I think that's important also. That's part of maturity, is realizing the boundaries and being able to manage this high energy that comes with all the hormones, which is great, and utilizing it for for good and for the direction you want to go, which for that you need boundaries, because if you don't have boundaries, then the energy just goes everywhere. But so I guess it's now saying this, it goes back to the interesting topic of, okay, how much, what you said about the strict parents or the open parents, right? And everyone's different, but how do you manage that balance of okay, there are these boundaries, but not to the point of like I'm the authority and you don't know anything, so so finding those boundaries, but those initiations, and just made me think of that Matthew McConaughey story, because again it shows it's a natural part of life where the son-father relationship changes.
And it's interesting how it's like how everybody's different, like we said, the players and also the parents, and they're the players, they used to have the famous fathers or whatever, but they're not feeling this pressure somehow. And the other ones, they don't even have the most famous, but somehow they feel the pressure, like also, I don't know, I don't want to name that much names, but I talked to Radka Zrubakova in here in Bratislava, and she said the same thing about her daughter, that her daughter is like, I don't know, I don't want to but she's like 800 or something, and she told me that she's also feeling so much pressure that she should be good because her mother was good, and also the son of Mechir, or any other famous Czech and Slovak players. They used to have the sons, and they had this pressure, I mean a lot of them. So I mean, it's interesting. I mean, there is something what the fathers, I mean, should do or should do better, and also something to realize for the players. I mean,
Yeah, I think it's very difficult, and I think it's not just difficult because I'm sure those parents, just like you, are not actually putting pressure on them.
yeah, yeah,
You but I think it's so difficult because it comes a lot also from the society, because it's not even just about the parent, but it's all the other people around, seeing the name and being like, oh, it's the son of so and so, and
exactly.
so you're gonna be great for
Yeah,
sure. So I think there's something that's very difficult, I think, for a parent, and it's almost like not difficult, it's impossible to you can't do anything about that. um, so that on one hand we can ask the question, like, should the actually child do something else? On the other hand, it actually makes sense, well, like you said, that actually it is an advantage, and it's actually a nice way where the parent and the kid can have like a joint passion, and like you said, that you can help him, like your son, greatly, because you really care and you have the knowledge, and like we said last time about the understanding of the game, you guys can have a conversation, and it's much more fruitful conversation than maybe like another parent has with the child, because the other parent might not have the understanding of the game, and they really want to help the child, and then they don't know how, so then they just pressure them in a non-productive way. Whereas you can look at it like, okay, I want to help him, so I'm actually like know what to think of and where to look and find the solution and give him the solution, so it's a productive kind of pressure.
yeah.
So it's interesting, right? Like you said at the beginning, so that's the advantage, and then disadvantage, I think, is more societal. Uh, but I think it goes back to the the core topic in all of this, is how much we define our self-worth by the sport, which is something I know I talked to you with and your son about, like picking up jujitsu and like doing something else, so you don't have all your eggs in one basket, so you're not doing just one thing, but you can become good at some other thing and realize that tennis or whatever it is just one topic in your life. It doesn't mean you can still do the tennis primarily, for example, but just picking up another skill that's completely different can be very useful, I think, and especially also doing that with a parent. You know, like for example, you and your son can like talk about BJJ now, right? And that's something that you are also new at, which goes back to my point earlier that it shows that you also don't know, you know, that brings you down to kind of like that level of his, and you can now both are beginners and something and can talk about that. And that makes you suddenly the parent instead of the coach.
Yeah.
It brings you into that father role, like, hey, like I'm just a father, he's my son, and he's like excited about this new thing, so I'm excited about this new thing, so I want to learn about it so I can talk to him about it.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, like what does the kid need? I think is the communication, right? It's the attention. So it's like the fact that you're having a conversation. It doesn't matter if it's about tennis or jujitsu or you know birds or whatever it is. You know, so I think that's the parent role. What parents need to realize, especially the coaches slash parents, is that we need to have conversations about some things that also I don't know about, so we are on an equal level. Because if you only have conversation about tennis, for example, then constantly you're on this balance, right? Because you know so much more, and then it's constantly feeding this loop of like I know when you don't know. And
Yeah. Yeah, the same happens now on the weekend when we went skiing, and I mean we can ski quite good, but my son, he said he wants to learn snowboarding, and it was only his third time, and I don't know a thing about snowboarding. So it was like in tennis I can tell you what you should do, but here you have to figure out. And I was just encouraging him to, and that was interesting. Yeah.
how was that? How was the experience for you actually? Like being on that in that role of that you don't know and you can't actually help him and he has to figure it out.
Yeah, anyway, I was fine. I was fine. Only that I was so scared, so I had to watch myself in that. Like that. I hope he doesn't break his leg or something. And that was kind of. I was happy that it's over. It was like 3-4 hours I was watching, and it wasn't easy, but I was trying to observe and to somehow hope and to pray or to be present. And so I'm not that somehow I'm not showing that I'm so afraid. But from that point, that I was okay, that I don't know a thing. I was like, okay, you have to figure out. I just observing the other, and maybe you should go more to the knees, or whatever. So it was interesting.
Were you more scared that he breaks something because like that he can't play tennis, or just in general? Like was it more like a this is an interesting topic again, right? Was it more like the coach that's scared that like now he if he breaks an arm that he's out of tennis for I don't know how many months, or was it more like a general like parental like worry? I wonder.
I have to say that it was more that he cannot play tennis when he do something to himself. So yeah, it was more about that.
Mhm. No, it makes sense, but it also makes sense what we talked about before, right? Because as a coach, as a parent, there's you want him to succeed, you want him to like be happy if he wins, and you know that if he breaks an arm and he can't practice, then he's gonna set him back, and he might
Exactly.
not be as happy. So it's difficult how those two roles really mix, right? It's
Mm.
um, yeah, I think, and it was actually a very good topic. I think this worry of a parent for the kid, like if something happens to them, because it's a topic like in general, like outside of tennis, that you have parents who are like afraid, like they have a little kid in the playground, they're like so anxious that they don't let them go anywhere. And then it can translate into also like a parent who has a kid who plays tennis who becomes anxious that they don't want something to happen to them, which in tennis means losing.
Mm.
And it's actually the same topic, because losing, if and it is that it's defined as, no, we want to win, and losing means pain, basically.
Yeah.
Losing is the same thing as the equivalent of the kid falling off a whatever in the playground.
Yeah.
That's why you see a lot of times these parents who are like on the fence of like, oh my God, like what's going to happen? I need my kid to win.
Yeah.
Um, and I believe, there's different other factors, but one of the factors I think is driven by this fact of like, I don't want my child to like suffer and be in pain,
Yeah.
to be disappointed and that. And I think that's something that parents need to work with also, like the letting go, which Tsitsipas's dad has to work through now,
Mm.
I can't imagine now what he's going through, also like sitting at home and like watching,
Mm.
Stefanos playing the match and losing, and he can't even like yell at
Mm.
him something in Greek from the stands anymore.
Mm.
So so he has like this feeling of like powerlessness, just like you're feeling on the snowboard,
Yeah.
like he might break his arm, but there's nothing I can do about it. You know,
Mm.
just
Mm.
like just like you see on the tennis, and just like you said about Tsitsipas saying that now he wants to figure things out on his own. I think it's so important in the development of the child that there is that transition of like, okay, I'm taking like hands back, and now they're free. But it takes a lot of courage from the parent. I'm not a parent myself, so I can't imagine it experientially. But I'm sure it takes a lot of courage and a lot of faith in feeling like, okay, like now I'm letting go.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, I feel like there's a interesting chemistry between the parent and the player with the motivation. It's like when the parent wants too much, it's like killing the motivation for the player,
Mm.
and the other way around. And then maybe it's in the middle, like everybody is different. Or maybe I know parents, they either they learn not to care that much, or maybe they're just like that. So they're not caring, and they're like, okay, I take you to the tournament, but I'm not even watching. And then the motivation somehow of the player goes up, or maybe it goes down, and he quits. Or so it's also interesting, the balance between the two motivations of the parents and of the player, how it changes, how it switches. That's also interesting.
Yeah, I think there's definitely like energetically, like you're still, connected with your child. So there's a deep connection of how you feel affects deeply how they feel. We know this from the development, from psychological development. You see how the kids, like I mentioned, the playground, they react. Whenever something happens, the little child, the first thing they do, they look at the mom or the dad, but most of the time it's the mom there. So they look at the mom, how the mom reacts, and then they react.
Mm.
So the kids learn a lot, like about reality and how to perceive the situation based on how the parent is perceiving the situation. So so it can be a effect where they're like similar, or it can be where the child is mitigating or moderating the behavior of the parent being opposite, is what you mentioned just now, right? So to create balance, if the parent is very like a lot of pressure and a lot of intensity, a lot of energy, and then the kid's going to be more phlegmatic and be more like, I don't care, because together they create the balance. And like you said, then it can switch the other way around, like the parent who's like chill and not, looks like it's okay, whatever, then the child has more energy. So I think that's something that a lot of parents need to realize, is that even though what I said before, like you feel like you can't do anything for the kid when they're playing the match, how you feel is affecting how they feel.
Yeah.
Even without, you don't have to say anything, because it's so ingrained in us since since we're born to watch and feel the parent and how they're feeling, and based on how they're feeling, interpreting the meaning of what's happening, that it affects us, as kids, as not much anymore, like as adults, not anymore, but like in adolescence, as kids growing up, there's still that connection, right? So when you're watching the match, and I think we talked about this before, and you told me this experience, right? When you relaxed and you accepted, like, okay, like no stress, even though he's losing, and you actually worked with yourself in that moment, changing your energy and letting go of the pressure, suddenly he started playing better. You can tell me about I remember you were telling me about this experience.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And it's also also somehow interesting, uh like the balance you were talking about. I remember I didn't like that much that when somehow the coach or the friends, they were talking about like, okay, you got it, we believe in you, and you are playing so good, you should be top 100, whatever. And I was trying, like they believed so much, so I was trying to somehow, I needed somehow the opposite. I don't know if I was if it came from my father, but I needed the opposite, to lose a few times in the first round. So everybody somehow was like, he doesn't play good, and there's no expectation maybe, or he doesn't have the potential, whatever. And then I was like with no pressure, and I was like trying to presvedčiť. I like,
Convince,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, convince everybody that, okay, I got it,
Yeah.
it's interesting, also the balance in the expectations, how somehow.
Well, what you just mentioned, I think, I thought of this phenomenon that you probably maybe seen Patrick Mouratoglou talked about when he talked with Kyrgios, when they had the interview on Kyrgios' podcast, right? And Kyrgios asked him that question, like, if you were my coach, like, what would be your advice to me? And Mouratoglou talked about this concept of which I really love, and it makes total sense, of this like talented players, um, which ties in really well to what we're saying about all the kids of the coaches, the parents who are good at the sport, and then everyone assumes like, oh, they're going to be super talented also because the parent was great, so they're going to be great, right? So what happens there is that from an early age, their self-worth, their identity actually is tied to them being great. So they perceive themselves as like, this is part of who I am, I have to be great. And it's similar to what you're saying. And I remember when we talked in the past, you're telling me like, you also, like, from a young age, like when you were out with other kids, like playing games or whatever, you were usually one of the more talented ones, in different sports and stuff. So that could also be the case, right? That there was this like, okay, I'm talented, and you were told you're talented, and by people, and because that happens, that creates that expectation, what you said, like everyone's expecting a lot from you because you're the talented one, right? You're the golden child.
Right.
And then what happens with these players is that then they start to, just like Kyrgios, they don't try. They like to tank. they like to tank because it creates this feeling of like, even if I lose, at least I don't lose my identity,
Mm.
because I can say I lost because I didn't try, not because I'm not talented. And such a common example of the players who everyone says like, oh, it's such a shame, like only if they worked harder. Just like Kyrgios is it's a perfect example. Like only if he actually had discipline and worked harder and gave a shit more, like he could have been number one in the world, but he's not trying. But and it's very easy to fall into a trap of like thinking like he's just lazy or whatever, and not realizing that it's not that he's lazy, it's actually the opposite is true, that there's so much pressure. That's what you said about the when the parent wants so much and the kid's not trying. It's because there's so much pressure that the mechanism, like what you've done, is that okay, I have to actually lose and kind of like to for everyone to stop having the expectations and thinking like, oh,
Exactly.
I'm perfect, so I can then play more free because I don't have to prove, like you said, and convince people, and to uphold, that's the word, like uphold this identity that like, this is me, I'm perfect. That creates so much pressure. And then it can be a seesaw effect, right? You said, because then you play free, then you win. And then as you're winning, then people come back again and be like, oh, so he's great, more expectation. And then you like fall back again.
Exactly. I mean, and now I have the realization that this is what is happening also with me and my son. Somehow, when he started to play well, even on the practices, the expectation, but I cannot help myself. But now I know I have to watch it. The expectation comes, so I even we are talking about, okay, now you only need this and this, and we're gonna play, like ITF tournaments, and you're gonna win whatever. And he feels it, and suddenly it goes like this, like I'm here with the expectation, and he wants somehow. And then we had the bad practice, very bad practice, when he plays so bad that I have to put my expectation down, and then he's working again. And then I mean, it's, yeah, I can watch it now. It's interesting.
And I see this, like I've experienced this in my me teaching people also, is like there's this feeling of like you tell the person something, and then like it starts working, so they're playing better, so you want to tell them another thing, and then they're like, it's working
Exactly.
great, so you want to tell them another thing, another thing, until they're like overwhelmed because it's like, you just told me 15 things in 10 minutes. And then they start going down because it's overload.
Exactly.
It's basically, it's too much love. That's what it is. It's they're getting suffocated by the energy,
Exactly.
because you're burning so brightly that you're burning them alive,
Exactly.
and in psychology we know like that actually too much positive emotion is actually also not good.
Mm.
It's something a lot of people don't know, because we think like, okay, it's positive emotion, you want as much as possible, right? You want as much happiness as like, no, because what happens is that the more you go up, the more you're going to drop down because the system has to balance itself. The same thing happens in psychology, right? Like it's the dopamine works the same way. The more you get dopamine, you have your baseline. So you more dopamine hits, like you do, you succeed, you eat sugar, you have sex, whatever, you play video game, whatever, you're getting those dopamine hits, and then you go depressed because then you drop. It's like the most common example of that is the Olympic athletes, right? Like they're preparing 4 years. They're preparing for this one event, 4 years of their life, and it's all leading up to this one event. And then they're in the Olympic village and the excitement, like the opening ceremony and the people and
Yeah.
all the other athletes, and the dopamine's like going through the roof. And then they're preparing for this. Imagine like a runner who runs like one sprint. So they're preparing 4 years for 10 seconds. So everything comes on that, and they do that, and the next morning they're sitting behind the breakfast table, and it's like a regular Wednesday.
Yeah.
And it's a very common experience that a lot of the Olympic athletes experience depression after
Mm.
the Olympics, because of this reason, that the dopamine, like they get that drop. So it is the realization that too much positive is gonna ultimately go for the dip, which, like you said, you can watch yourself, but also, you know, again, not being too hard on yourself. It's the important thing is when the dip happens, it's going back to what I said when I was talking about Frankel and accepting the suffering. When the dip happens, it's also important not to then be like, okay, we have to take it like back up from the
Right.
dip, but just to let it be, and it's gonna rebalance itself. Like that's the same thing that happens with dopamine. The problem if you have the depression and you try to again get excited and eat sugar and whatever just to like not feel bad, you're making the problem worse. So you don't want to be up and down too much, and that's what you see with the best coaches, with the pro players, right? In the stance, they're just like even keel, like
Right.
as much as possible. Like they're not doing this.
Right. Yeah, and also I have to watch myself, or I think I'm thinking about the balance between like I see my son to be a great tennis player. We're gonna play a big tournaments, and then when it drops, it's like he's never going to be a tennis pro.
Yeah.
But I have to, there's a fine balance between them that okay, put down the expectation, but don't lose the belief. Like the balance between belief and expectation has to be there. That it's not like he suddenly feels that okay, my father doesn't believe in me, but he just feels okay, my father somehow doesn't have that much expectation, like say it's fine balance. I have to think about it more a little bit.
And I think it goes back to, I would say that he needs to feel that you're just, it's just a father.
Mm,
And when I say just, I don't mean that like
right.
that's like bad, but a lot of times, we um, underestimate the kind of day-to-day normal things that are giving us this feeling of safety and security. Like I said, like a regular Wednesday, a regular walk with the father, or having a conversation about whatever, like, or
Exactly.
what kind of movie you're gonna go watch.
Mm,
Because those are the things that are not too much up or not too much down. Those are the things that are, in the pleasant middle. Um, and when we translate that to tennis, what I mean to say is that sometimes it's just another day, it's just another practice.
mm,
To see the big picture, because what you're saying is like you can see the big picture in like the black and white kind of way. So you look at the big picture like, okay, now he's gonna be pro, or now he's not gonna be pro. So you're seeing the big picture from the black and white filter,
yeah.
or you can see the big picture from the fact that like this is just one practice in so many years of his career, so it actually does not matter at all how the practice goes,
Yeah.
even though while you're in the practice you're trying to make it as best as possible.
Yeah.
Just which just goes back to what Federer said so beautifully in that speech of his, right? That this it's just another point. And
Yeah.
even though you're trying to play the point as best as you can, it is the most important thing there is in the moment. The moment it's done, it was just another point.
Yeah.
And you can move that thinking to practice, to a week, to a tournament, and even to the whole career. Thinking like at the end of the day, it's just one part of life,
Yeah. Yeah.
because he's also gonna have a relationship, have his family, have his kids, have another job or business or whatever, other hobbies and friends and whatever. So that thinking, I think, is so important and so paradoxical, but I think that's the golden kind of way that we need to strive towards, is like, okay, I'm so fully in this, but at the same time I'm letting go. And there's a line that I want to, I'm sure I told you before, and I want to share, which I love. And I, I frequently say that I don't have any tattoos, but if I had like to tattoo something on myself, this would be the line. And it comes from Ram Dass, and the line is, um, become more involved and less attached.
Mm. Mm.
And I think that that's exactly it. The more we become involved in the doing, in the process, in the practice, in the tournament, in the career, we're fully involved, but yet at the same time, we are not attached to it, meaning we see the big picture of the fact that it's just another practice, it's just another tournament, it's just another, so just one part of life. It's not that big a deal.
Yeah,
And
it was
having and holding those two modes at the same time is the paradox.
exactly. I remember Federer when he was playing the great final Australian Open or something like that. Like he said, and in the fifth set, he was so against Nadal, he was so happy to be part of that match that somehow he didn't care if he wins or loses.
Hmm.
Somehow it was like he was also, I mean, of course, trying as much as he could, and he won the match, but somehow he was, I mean, so happy to be part of it. That's the paradox and the balance that we should have.
When the experience becomes bigger than you,
Yeah.
when exactly. And I think it's the same what, what I would guess is what Steve Jobs was thinking about Apple, or what a lot of these great successful people are thinking about, these things that become bigger than them. It's the stage itself, or the environment is it becomes more than just about you. um and then when it becomes more than just about you, and you can actually feel that, then you can let go of your attachments, which at the end of the day, all the attachments are about you, about fulfilling some of your personal desires or needs that you really cling onto. um so that second part of that line, become less attached, um which I think those two things actually feed into each other, right? Because the more involved you are, the less you're attached, and the less you're attached, the more you can be involved. Those things, work simultaneously, and working on our attachments. That's why it's so important. And realize every time you have that experience where you mentioned that you feel like I'm like burning him alive with my energy and I'm going too much, and also yourself, more importantly, right? Not just him, but also you're like spending so much energy unnecessarily, like more than is needed in the moment. Then you can check yourself, like, hey, like where's the attachment here? What am I so attached to here that I need to make it happen so much? And that's why I'm, burning myself and everything around me right now. um and let it go. And I think that's the ongoing kind of almost spiritual practice of all of us, like realizing those attachments, and letting them go, and paradoxically then becoming more involved in the process and ending up getting way better results.
It's
Paradox.
like, yeah, it's like easier said. It's like I want to win, but I doesn't need to win. And that's also maybe also Alexander Zverev problem with the Grand Slams. And let's see, he's in the semifinal. Let's see how it handles it this time. So
Good. I
we'll
think that
see.
was good. I think that was great. Well, thank
Perfect.
you. Thank you
Yeah.
for this
Yeah.
fun.
Thank you. Okay. Bye.